This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing stated on it, either by its hosts or any guests, is to be construed as psychological, medical, or legal advice. You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. I'm Haley Radke. Today I'm talking with Jan Beatty, poet, professor, and author of the recently released memoir, American Bastard. We talk about how Jan wants to disrupt the traditional narrative, what she calls the whitewashed view of adoption. I ask Jan what happens when you publicly name your hockey-famous biological father, even after he denies your paternity claim. We even get to hear a reading from her book, and it is so powerful, it certainly made me tear up. Make sure you stick around to the end of the podcast today, where we'll share how you can join our February 2022 Adoptees Only book club, reading American Bastard with the author herself. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Jan Beatty. Welcome, Jan.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here, Haley. Thanks for doing this.
Oh my goodness, I'm so thrilled. You are our book club author for February 2022. So we are going to be reading your tremendous memoir, American Bastard. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I would love it if you would start by sharing some of your story with us.
I was born in a place called Rosalia Asylum and Maternity Hospital in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. And it's a place that they used to call homes for unwed mothers. And I hate that name. I hate that dated language. But so young women would go there, have their babies there, and then leave the babies there. And obviously it functioned as an orphanage. And I was there the first year of my life, as far as I know. I'm not sure exactly how long. And so then prospective parents would come there, and I don't exactly know how it worked. Meet the babies, look at the babies, I don't know. But if you would go online and look at Rosalia, you'd see these black and white photos that are pretty bleak. It was run by the Sisters of Charity. And so I was there in the early 50s, so we're going back a ways. And I have some poems about this, and it's also in my memoir. But there's one photo, for example, called The Playroom, which is a really bad name for this because it's sort of like a broken down metal carousel with chipped paint, and these babies are like laying on it, and it looks like some drugged out babies being spun around. There's this bare bulb hanging there. It's kind of really depressing. Anyway, so there are these photographs there, which was part of my research when I was working on the book. I found out I was adopted when I was 6 years old. And at the time, I didn't know what to do with that. And then it took me a while to search. And it took me about 10 years to find my birth mother once I started searching. I've met her when I was 32 years old. I found out my real name when I was 32. And it took me a long time to get my birth certificate, my pre-amended birth certificate. And then it took me a while after that to find my birth father, who was I say was because he died a few years ago, but he was a Canadian hockey player, professional hockey player who won 3 Stanley Cups for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He also played for the Pittsburgh Hornets, the New York Rangers, and the Boston Bruins. And, that part was kind of exciting at the time, mixed with a lot of sadness or distance. And then, neither my birth mother nor my birth father wanted to have a relationship with me. And honestly, I don't know that I really wanted to have one with them. I just maybe wanted to have had maybe every now and then get in touch with them. I didn't want a whole nother family. I didn't want birthday cards and Christmas. I didn't want any of that stuff. I felt like it was too late for that. I didn't want to pretend that things were happy. And that was one of the big reasons that I really wrote American Bastard, was because I've been really upset about the cultural story of adoption, which I think has been whitewashed and made beautiful with this chosen baby stuff. So I'm not a fan of that.
Well, I listened to a few interviews that you had done today with writers focused on your writing and poetry, etc. And I found it really interesting how when you brought up adoption as this hard thing that you're critiquing, one of the interviewers kind of got like, oh yeah, I totally understand, and then twisted it to a situation that was their own personal kind of thing that I was like, that's not really related. And then the other one was kind of like, oh yeah, but I know like this open adoption super way better now. And I was like, wow, even after reading your memoir, which is very raw and real and really says the hard things about adoption, that we talk about that stuff here on Adoptees On all the time. We don't whitewash anything. We're very critical of adoption. Even after reading that, they're still like, oh yeah, but.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's such a cultural move, and I think part of it is it's so embedded in our culture. Well, in American culture, too, you have to protect the mother at all costs. All motherhood is sacred, and I think that is so wrong to put that on any mother, because mothers are women, mothers are humans, and like, with flaws and issues, and no one can be this perfect thing, and they shouldn't be expected to. So let's just acknowledge the mixed nature of things and the ambivalence of things and how things don't work out sometimes. I mean, I'm not anti-adoption at all. I'm anti-whitewashing the story of adoption. I just would like us to try to talk in a more complicated way about it. And you're so right that I also think it's part of the people-pleasing epidemic in cultures. It's like, let's be nice, especially with women. We're taught to be nice, let's be nice, and it kills us, because as I imagine that if we don't acknowledge difficulties and trouble and trauma, it all goes inward, and then we have trouble that we have to live with individually, and that's not how it should be. So, I appreciate you noticing that. And that leads me to this advice I got when it took me about 20 years to write American Bastard, which seems so crazy right now, but I had to learn how to write about it in a way that was complicated. I had to do a lot of therapy about it, which, I've already had been in therapy, but I had to work on adoption a lot more. And one of my writer friends had told me, she said, why don't you write an introduction that is welcoming and friendly? And I said, okay. And so I tried to write that introduction to the book. This is before it was called American Bastard. And I hated it, and it was boring, and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do it this way. It's maybe people might like it better, but that's not what I'm trying to say. That's not what the book is going to need to be. And so instead I wrote an introduction which talks about how you really don't get this. Don't pretend you get it unless you've been in this position. You don't know what it's like not to know who your mother is unless it's happened to you. And so it's all based on what you're talking about, that denial, that really deep denial that people have.
I was like, when you started talking about the introduction, I was like, I don't remember this happy under what do you? I'm like flipping through.
No, it's not there.
No, there's so many just really hard things. And for me, I've read a lot of adoptee written books. You can't see behind me, but my whole bookshelf behind me, I don't know, probably have 100 books written by adopted people. And the ones I find the most powerful are people that just unapologetically say the truth. And I feel like that's what you've done. And it comes at a cost of hurting, yes, the societal narrative. Yes, great. We should do that. We should upend that narrative. But it can come at great personal cost to hurting our loved ones or our adoptive family, whatever kind of relationship we have with them. And can you talk a little bit about that? You know, a lot of people wait till later. You said it took you 20 years to write this. People wait till later to search. If they do, they wait for their adoptive parents to die, as morbid as it is, because they don't want to hurt their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Was that any part of what made you wait? Were these things kind of swirling around in you? How hard is it just to say the true thing, even though it might not be well received?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know any woman who doesn't know how hard it is to just say the truth thing. I've been a teacher for like 30 years, and I've directed a group called the Mad Women in the Attic at Carlow University for 15 of those years, and I'm very familiar with women and women writers and how much we struggle to say anything, but to put things in writing that are difficult and we feel might hurt someone. And I mean, I tell my students, and I had to tell to myself, but I tell my students, look, you know, this is your time here on planet Earth. This is your life. What are you going to do with it? And, you know, you have the right to speak. You have the right to speak about your life. You know, who gets to tell you you don't get to do that? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. And, you know, I believe those words, and, you know, enacting those is another thing. But yeah, was it hard to do? Absolutely. And my struggles were more about getting to the truth inside me and dealing with my own depression and finding a way to be strong enough to search for my birth mother. I didn't tell my adoptive parents that I was searching. I didn't tell them when I was in the process of finding her. And in a large way, I mean, I had a horrible relationship with my adoptive mother, like not one good moment, but I had a really good relationship with my adoptive father. But in a really basic way, I felt that it wasn't their business, you know, that me searching for my birth parents. I felt like it was my right to do. I wasn't doing anything to hurt them. And I think that needs to be reframed also, because people go right to that issue. It's like, oh, I don't want to hurt my adoptive parents. I'm like, well, hold on a sec. You know, I mean, it is your life. That doesn't mean people are not affected, but you have a right to find out where you came from, to find out your medical history. Are you kidding? You know, I mean, it's very basic. And I really support that right. And how one chooses to manage those relationships around that, I think, is very individual. Depends on what's going on in the adoptee's life. By the time I found my birth mother, I think my adopted father had died. And by the time I found my adopted father, my adopted mother had died. But I wouldn't have told them. I mean, I was older. You know, I was in my 30s. when I was doing this, and long time out living on my own, and so I don't know. I guess other people might have different views on that, but no, my any fears of hurting my adoptive parents didn't figure into it. What figured into it more was when I was writing poems, that kind of came up, because I was writing poems when my adoptive parents were alive, and I did a lot of work on that in therapy. And also with poetry, as you know, poetry is not autobiography, and we have the speaker of the poem, and we have a lot of untruths in poems, so that makes it much easier. Writing a memoir, well, that's a whole different thing. And I have great respect for nonfiction writers now. I, I, I'm a poet at heart, and that's what I do. But yeah.
Well, I'm wondering because lots of adopted people don't search, period. And I just want to say I very much appreciate that your stance on adoptee rights. We should have access to our original birth certificates. We should have access to our medical history. We should just know where we came from. That's a human right. So I don't want to just brush past that. I appreciate that your stance on that. The curiosity I have, lots of adoptees just don't want anything to do with their biological parents, and they might want a medical history and nothing more. Some can't even search.
What do you mean? Can't? What do you mean can't?
Especially for transnationally adopted people, it may be very close to impossible to find family, especially if there's a language barrier. Some countries, there's no records. So it can be extremely complex.
Sure.
So I just always want to acknowledge that as well. I'm a domestic infant adoptee, as you are, except I'm Canadian. I love that you mentioned your bio dad as a hockey player, except for Toronto. That's very sad. I live in Edmonton, but it's Edmonton Oilers here.
He's from Winnipeg, though.
Well, okay, there's Winnipeg Jets now, I guess. I knew hockey was going to be a little sideline we went down. So I'm trying to come back to what I was thinking about. Finding and then having secondary rejection, which is what I experienced with my first mother. She didn't want a relationship with me either, so that doesn't feel good. But I'm curious about what decision you made after you found your father and he was like, oh yeah, you look super like my other daughter. And then subsequently rejected you and we were like, no, actually, I don't think I'm your dad. What was that like for you? And did you ever explore more opportunities for relationships with other extended family members?
That one was harder somehow, maybe because I just met him that one time outside of Boston, and he was a golf pro after he was a hockey player. And I ambushed him at his job because I thought he would not agree to meet me. So I think part of surprising him, because I surprised him, I think that was part of why he almost was accepting me as this, or accepting that this could be a possibility. You look like one of my other daughters. I think this could be possible, etc. And then 2 weeks later, he called me and said, no, I don't think I could be your father, etc. I wasn't expecting that. I try to have low expectations. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I try to have low expectations because things are so difficult to find. And I thought it was miraculous to meet him. And I really felt like that was the only time I would see him. But no, I felt like it was of no use to try to contact him again. I mean, and I was never too interested in any extended family. I mean, why would I want an extended family? That sounds terrible, but to me, it's like more trouble. It's
No, I'm glad you're saying what you think, because I'm like, okay, well, she doesn't want me. Well, who else will take me? So that's sort of been my perspective. And you're like, no, well.
I also have read a lot as you have. And so, you don't know what you're going to find when you keep going or when you go at all. And I know that my adopted sister, when she found her birth mother, she found a whole load of trouble, and someone who was mentally ill and someone who wanted money from her. And so I felt like meeting my birth mother, and even though she didn't want, I actually met with her 3 times, but she didn't want to tell her family about me, and my birth father didn't want to tell his family about me. So, adoptees are this dirty secret, and why do I want to put myself through more, and what am I going to find with this other family? And I think with some adoptees, I don't know, with me, I feel like family is not a happy word. Home is not a happy word. Why do I want one? I wanted to know who my birth father and my birth mother were. I wanted to know where I came from. I wasn't looking for some happy story, because I don't even know what that looks like. And I was looking for the story. I don't know what.
That's so powerful. No, when you were talking, I flipped to this section of your book right away, because there's a point where you're calling your birth mother to meet, and she says, "Oh no, my family's coming in for the holiday weekend." And you say she has no awareness that she's talking about her, quote, family, as if the word has nothing to do with me, her firstborn. And I think a lot of us have felt that othered. I have one more question down this rabbit trail, and then we can shift to something else, Jan. But what was it like for you to publicly name your father, who was, like you said, a really successful hockey player in the NHL? So famous by Canadian standards, maybe American standards too. I don't know. Depends how big of a hockey fan you are. And did you have any pushback from the family at all, from the extent, the brothers or sisters or people that you, I'm assuming, didn't end up connecting with at all?
Well, I mean, I was nervous about that when I was writing the book, with my birth mother too. And I went to see a lawyer and to find out, what I needed to do. And so I got advice on that. And he said, because by the time I was writing the book, my birth father had died, and the lawyer said that, well, since your birth father is a public figure and he's all over the internet, well, maybe I have that wrong. Definitely when I was writing the book, he hadn't died yet. Yeah, he hadn't died yet. But the lawyer said, because he's a public figure, you can put him in the book, but what you need to do is know that he's your father, your birth father. So I had to go to my birth mother and get it in writing that she was my mother. And so I went, it was my third meeting with her, and I had written out the statement that, said that she was my mother. And I said, I want you to sign this piece of paper. And that's not in the book. I want you to sign this piece of paper and saying that you're my mother. I didn't tell her I was writing a book. And she said, I don't want to sign that. And I said, look, by this time, the third meeting, I was finally getting angry, finally getting confident enough to be angry. And I said, look, I've never asked you for anything. I want you to sign this piece of paper. And so she signed it. And I wasn't going to leave there till she signed that piece of paper. We were in this restaurant. I should have put that in the book. But, but So, I have that. So I don't know. So I felt that I needed to talk to a lawyer about that stuff. And I haven't heard from anyone. I've heard from some hockey fans. And but because that was so long ago when he won those Stanley Cups, someone will have to be really old to remember him as a hockey player, or unless they're Canadian and a big hockey fan. But I don't think the book has probably made it to his family. I don't know, because there's been a whole lot of reviews in America. I don't know, but I expect it will eventually. So,
Well, I wondered about that because I had seen a couple of some news coverage, and it does name him in those articles as well. So I figured that would be the first way that they would find out about it, since
yeah,
if you've not connected with them, they don't have Jan Beatty as a Google alert set up or anything.
no, no, I haven't heard it.
I'm assuming he didn't, tell them all, oh, by the way, there's this other daughter.
No, I don't think they said anything. Although I went up, it was really cool to go to the Hockey Hall of Fame and see him in Toronto. I know you don't like Toronto, but in Toronto, and
Oh, no, just not the Maple Leafs. Toronto's
Okay.
great. Yeah, yeah.
it's not the Maple Leafs.
Well, Kate, I was going to ask you about that because can you tell us just that little story about asking for a photo, and how did that feel to identify yourself in the way that you do in your story?
There were two instances, one in Toronto, one in Winnipeg. And, I went on this trip. Do you know which one are you talking about?
Either one. I have them both written down. Hockey Hall of Fame, and then, Winnipeg, which feels probably not as big a destination as Toronto, but,
Yeah, I went to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. And when I saw the Stanley Cup, I got into the room, and I was alone on the trip, and I got into the room with the Stanley Cups and saw my birth father's name and his picture, and I was really excited, and there was no one to tell, and I looked around, so there were these two guys happened to be there looking around, and I said, hey, I wasn't talking to them, but I said, hey, this guy is my father. And they said, what? And I said, yeah. They said, is your father? I said, yeah. And I said, will you take a picture? And they said, yeah. And I mean, I didn't know if they thought I was crazy or something, but they didn't. They were excited. They were really excited. They didn't ask any questions. We didn't talk, but it was really unexpected. I got really excited, and I realized I had to tell someone, and there was no one there. So I just grabbed whoever was there. Luckily, there were nice people there.
But that info led you to a sort of private tour in Winnipeg. And it was like a similar thing, telling a stranger, this is my dad. And it also, to me, is kind of like, they didn't want me in the beginning. They didn't want me the second time around as an adult. And then, is this part of a reclamation? Like, how do you say I'm your daughter for real? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it was an important trip for me. I went to Winnipeg and took a train. I took a lot of trains across Canada, but took a train to Winnipeg and decided to stay there for a couple of days. And I wasn't looking for him. He was still alive. I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't looking for the street where he lived. It wasn't like that. I was just going there to sort of be where he was, just to feel him. And so I stayed right in a hotel. I stayed at the Fairmont in downtown Winnipeg, and I was just wandering around, and I went to the I forget what it was called now, this sports place there, where they had the Canadian Hall of Fame, Hockey Hall of Fame there. And, I had put all this planning into this trip just to get there, and all this money and just to get there. And when I got there, they said that the place was closed that day. And I said, it can't be. That's not like, it's possible, because I didn't have any more days. And so I told the guard, the security guard said, it's not open. I said, well, here's why I'm here. And this is my birth father. This guy's my birth father. And he won 3 Stanley Cups. And he looked at that photo with me and he said, that's your father? I said, yeah. And so we're just staring at that picture. And he just looked at me, and I was all jacked up. I was really excited, but also very upset at the same time. And he said, and he looked at his watch. He looked around. He's this really big guy, and he said, "Okay." He said, "How about if I just give you a tour?" And I said, "That would be cool." I mean, he was the nicest guy in the world, and we took a long tour. He took me down by the ice, and you could tell he loved hockey, and he loved being there. And he just told me I wish I had recorded it, but he told me all these facts that I can't remember. And then he took a picture of me. He said, "Do you want me to take a picture of you with your birth father?" I said, "Yeah." And I mean, it was one of the nicest things someone's ever done for me. And I mean, he didn't have to do that. And that was cool. That was like, it just, it was just one of those moments where I said, it can't happen like this. I have to go in there. And it's like, I mean, sometimes that works. I mean, I wasn't trying to push my way in. I was just saying, no, that can't be like that. And in my experience, sometimes that works. It's like, no, we have to do it this way now. And someone sees how much you want something or need something, sometimes, doors open.
You know what the saddest part of that story is for me, Jan, is that stranger was so much kinder to you than your biological parents.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I mean, when I talk about my book, I talk about my family of strangers and the quotes that I use in the book and the musicians and writers in the book who are my family of strangers. And I feel like as adoptees, we adopt families of strangers who become our friends and our new families. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. I'm not trying to whitewash this thing. I mean, it's a brutal, screwed up thing. And amazing wildness comes out of it. But you're right. It was sad. and it's wrong. And that's that.
That's that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back. You share a bit at the beginning that you actually trained as a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And so you worked in that field for about 5 years, and you had a couple different jobs. You worked in a prison. You recount some of the some hard stuff in there. And you also worked at an abortion clinic. And honestly, since I read that, this has been stuck in my head. I try not to be super political on the show. I try and keep it neutral. We've got people with all kinds of opinions that listen. But the thing that I really wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing this or not, but how did it feel to be working there as an adopted person? Did your identity as an adoptee come into the clinic with you? Did that impact your experience of being there at all?
I mean, in one sense, I feel like it had to have, since that's a huge part of me, and yet consciously, I would say no. I mean, that's before I knew that my birth mother tried to give herself an abortion, would try to abort me. And I have some of those poems in my early books. But I think the main thing there is that, has always been so important to me to a woman's right to choose. And that's the whole thing. It's like I totally support a woman's right to choose whatever they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to have an abortion, if they want to adopt or become a birth mother or whatever, I feel like that's everyone's individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, no, I don't think so. Because as I said before, I'm not against adoption at all. I just want to complicate the conversation. And I think I was...
That's interesting. You said, I'm not against adoption at all, but I want to complicate the conversation. And you described your relationship with your adoptive mom as really challenging. And
I think I said really horrible.
Horrible. Yes. I was putting a nicer spin on it, I guess. I talk to so many people that are very, all for family preservation, and maybe wouldn't say I'm anti-adoption, but that's kind of more the stance. Like, how do we keep impoverished families intact? How do we, give women the power and choice that they need to decide what their family is going to look like? All of those kinds of things. And I read your book and I sort of thought it skewed to that side. So I find that interesting that you say that.
It's skewed to what side?
Oh, just so critical of the adoption experience and the pain and that an adoptee experiences in their lifetime, and the identity confusion and all of those very hard things. And so in knowing those really hard things about what it's like to live as an adopted person, I mean, I don't want anybody to choose that, for kids to have the same experience that, we did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think there are adoptees who've had very different experiences than what we're talking about, and better, maybe not beautiful, if they're really being honest about it, but it's not my place to tell anyone how to do anything, but how to run their life. But I just want to, as an adoptee, I don't want some ridiculous narrative defining us, defining adoptees in this way that is so far from true. It's unbearable to live with. So that's why I'm saying this is how it was for me. And can we insert this as part of the narrative, even though I'm sick of this narrative being talked about? Can we insert this as part of the true story of being of what can happen as an adoptee, what can happen with adoption? Let's not make it beautiful if it's not. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes it is, but most times it's going to be mixed. So let's just talk about how it's mixed. So yeah, that's interesting that you thought that, and I could see how you'd think that from my book, because it definitely wasn't pretty. So I don't know.
That's okay. I took us down a spot I didn't probably intend to. So all good.
That's fine.
I'm curious, as you've done press for your book, I kind of mentioned I had listened to a couple of interviews where I was like, I don't think the interviewer gets it. How you have found telling this other side of adoption, trying not to, I think when you're saying whitewash, maybe you could expand on that, what you mean by that. You just, I'm hearing it as the happy childhood, everything is roses and sunshine sort of narrative. That's what I'm kind of hearing when you say that. How has that been for you personally, having to sort of explain your side of things to people even after they've read your memoir, which I think is, pretty clear on all the hard things you experienced, but just me? Maybe that's just me.
Well, that's kind of interesting because in prior years when I have a number of poems I have 6 books of poetry and I have a number of poems in those books. And when I would read those poems, I would get into trouble sometimes with people. I've had adoptive mothers come up to me and be upset with me about my poetry. And at times, some of those conversations have turned out well, where we've gone back and forth and come to understand each other. Some have not. I've had to say to some adoptive mothers, this is after a poetry reading, like, look, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking about you in the poem. I'm writing a poem about my experience. I'm not talking about you. It's like, but they're taking it way personally and very angry with me. And okay, that's happened. And I was really afraid when I was doing my first couple readings of American Bastard. I was afraid of what was going to happen. I thought people were going to be really angry with me based on some of those experiences that I've had, because in my experience, people didn't understand what I was saying. They would, again, try to make it nice or say things like, I always thought I was adopted, or, at least you had someone who wanted you, et cetera, all the cliches. And so, but that hasn't happened. I mean, maybe it will, but I've done quite a number of readings in person and online, and people have been really supportive and welcoming. Maybe they're not saying what they're really thinking. Maybe they're not coming to the readings, or I don't know exactly, but I've had some really good feedback. For example, I was read at the Miami Book Fair in November, and in person, to a group of people I didn't know. So it wasn't just like all my friends liked the book, So people I didn't know. And I was nervous. I thought, oh boy, let's see how this goes. And because of content. And I got really good feedback there. I mean, a lot of people are saying, I had no idea that adoptees felt this way. People are saying that to me. Someone from the book fair did an interview with me, a recorded interview after my reading, and he happened to be a young adoptive father, which just so happened. And after the reading, he was so nice. He said, I learned a lot reading your book, and he said, I'm going to talk to my son differently now. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, wow, that is cool.
Is that the best feedback?
Yeah. And that's all I'm saying is like, just try to imagine like what your kid might be going through. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
That's all, and you think you are, but you're not. And so far it's been really amazing. And one of the other unexpected things is I feel a lot more sort of grounded. I feel a lot more rooted on planet Earth or something, because I've never been able to say all this stuff out loud so much as I have been with reading the book. And it's really helped me tremendously. And I wasn't expecting that at all, because I've just been carrying it in my body for 40 years or something.
That's profound. I'm wondering, because I will admit to you, someone sent me a link to your book when it first was published, because I hadn't followed you. I didn't know about you before. But as you said, you're prolific. You've got multiple books of poetry out and things, and I didn't know you. And I definitely don't know every single adoptee, but I know about a lot of different adoptee books. Have you been in the adoptee community before, or the adoption community online at all? Been to any adoption conferences or anything like that previously? Or is this sort of the first big, I was going to say salvo into into adoptee land? I know you've written about adoption in your other poetry books, but...
Yeah, I did in the past, maybe going back, say maybe 15, 20 years. I did, when I was starting to try to write the book, I did go to some local adoption groups. I went to an adoption conference in Tampa. Maybe that was, I don't know how many years ago that was. And I don't know if I wasn't ready for it, or it definitely was not a positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
It freaked me out, and I was not. I think I wasn't ready for it. It was so loaded, as you could imagine, and the adoption triad was everywhere, and it was you could almost. And it sounds awful, but it was happening. You could pick out who was who. The adoptees at this particular conference were sort of gathered around, sort of more like kids. The birth mothers were crying, and the adoption mothers were kind of stern in the corner. I mean, to generalize, but that was mostly what was happening. And
I can see it. I can absolutely picture it.
And I'm like, I want to get out of here. I don't know what's going on, but it was too much.
Fair enough. Okay. I was curious about that.
But I'm sure there's good groups and much better groups now.
We've come a long way, and also not very far at all. So I think that about sums it up. Well, I want to, of course, recommend your memoir to folks, American Bastard. It is phenomenal. I was so moved reading it. You beautifully weave poetry throughout. I'm a sucker for poets. I think I've said that before here, just because you just have a way of capturing language. I think that a lot of authors struggle to be succinct, a little more succinct. But I really enjoyed your book. I identified with so many different spots. I have all kinds of things marked in here. But I really hope that folks pick it up and read along with us this month. Jen is so graciously coming to our book club later, so we can pick her brain a little more about what she's shared in American Bastard. And yes, well done, you. Gold star from me. Not that you were looking for it, but absolutely. You had mentioned earlier that you might be willing to read something for us.
Sure.
I would love that.
I can read one of the beginning sections, view of the book. It's page 19, but it's imagining Rosalia Asylum and Maternity Hospital, where I, as I said, spent the first year of my life. After the tearing and rolling, you're an infant somewhere in a crib, in a room full of cribs. Someone is taking care of you. You don't know who. Who's the person who picks you up? Is it a woman? Is it a nun? There is no story in sight, no same loving face, blood of my blood face. The smells, the feel of the rolling and tearing are gone. Gone where? No face who has your face. No way of knowing who is who. What hands are these? Why are they different every time? There is no bonding taking place. The story is fractured here and forever after. Then strangers come to gaze at you, touch you, wonder about you. They decide to pluck you out of there and make you theirs. These strangers will take your name away and hide it. The government will cooperate. It will take months and months for this baby trade to be completed. A baby in exchange for money. Meanwhile, someone is feeding you. Is it a kind person? What do they smell like? You will never know these hands again. You will be taken to a strange place. People will start calling you the lucky one, the chosen baby. No one sees that your story is gone, that you are being handed off like a football. From now on, everyone will pretend that your first story never existed. They will act and want you to act as if you are one of them. Their blood, their faces, their world. You know that to survive, you will have to do this. You will have to pass. But your new mother has dark hair and brown eyes. Your father has dark hair. Their noses are not like yours. Your white blonde hair shines sickly like the odd light in a bad painting. Later, you look at your cousins. They have beautiful long eyelashes, all of them the same. You value how others resemble others. You long for it. In first grade, you refuse to make a family tree. Your parents and teacher suggest you make one based on your new family. You refuse.
Oh, thank you. That is extremely powerful. I was tearing up as you were reading it. Wonderful. Thank you. I read your other book of poetry, The Body Wars. Is so good. I really enjoyed it. And so there's lots of things for folks to read by you. But what did you want to recommend to us, Jan?
I actually had a couple. Journey of the Adopted Self, which I think is a book by Betty Jean Lifton that maybe a lot of people know about, I hope. But that was the one book when I was searching and when I was working on writing the book that really helped me. I felt like she got it. I mean, she really got it. And that book helped me so much. I kept going back to it. And I loved the interviews with adoptees, and it definitely wasn't pretty. And I appreciated it so much. So that really made me say, oh, thank God somebody knows what's going on, you know?
Yes. I remember feeling those same things reading that.
Yeah. Can I say another one?
Absolutely.
This is a little different. This is called The West Pole, and it's by Diane Glancy. I don't know if you know Diane. She's a Native American writer who has many books, maybe 30 books, I don't know, but she's one of my heroes, one of my mentors. And The West Pole is a book of sort of essays, but she talks about, in her experience as a Native American, but talks about otherness and talks about finding solid ground in movement, and talks about identity and landscape. And man, I found a lot of sense of home in her books. So I always go back to her.
Wonderful. I'm looking it up right now, and I will absolutely share that as well in the show notes for folks. Thank you so much for talking with me. I so enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
Where can folks connect with you online?
My website, janbeatty.com. Pretty easy. And on there, it'll direct you to my email, and Twitter is janbeatty27.
Perfect. So I will be sharing where you can connect with us for book club with Jan, and also linking to all the other spots. So when you've got new stuff coming up, we won't miss it. Thank you. I really appreciated our conversation.
Thank you, Haley. It's great talking to you.
I'm so grateful Jan agreed to join our Adoptees Only book club for February 22, if you're listening, in the month this was released. And what that means is we are going to have a live Zoom call with her. Right now it's scheduled for North America morning of Saturday, February 26th. And if you join as a supporter in Patreon, which is the crowdfunding website that Adoptees On uses to cover the cost of producing this podcast, you will be invited to join that book club with us. So if you go to adopteeson.com/community, you can find the details of how to join. Or if you are curious about book club and you want to read a little bit more about that first, go to adopteeson.com/book club, and you can see some of the other books we picked for 2022. And of course, every Patreon supporter will have access to the Zoom link to join us live. If you're not able to join us live, the audio of our book club recording with Jan Beatty will be dropped into your Patreon podcast feed a week or so after the recording. And so if you're hearing this after the fact, the audio will be there for you to deep dive her book a little further. I am so thankful for the authority that Jan speaks with. I think we were wrapping up and I was kind of asking her about a couple questions that were in the middle of the interview, which I don't know if they made the edit or not. You know, sometimes we try and tighten things up a little bit for time and just clarity. But when I was asking her about them, she shared, and I don't think she would mind me sharing this. We were off mic already. I wish I had it recorded. That's one of those podcaster woes, you know, always be recording. But I was kind of clarifying something with her, and she said, I don't want anyone telling me what to do, so I don't want to tell anyone else what they should do. And I thought, wow, that is someone that has full agency over their life now and has claimed it. And it just felt so like such a empowered stance. I thought, yeah, good for you. Good for you. Just, I don't want people telling me what to do, and I don't want to tell other people what they should do either. Anyway, so I thought I'd share that because it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me. I'm so thankful for my Patreon supporters who regularly financially support the show, for my book club readers who are joining in that same fashion. And so I'd love to have you join us. If you connected with Jan, if you want to hear her talk more about American Bastard, I would invite you to come on over, adopteeson.com/community. And of course, follow Jan at her website to figure out if there's other poetry books that you may love to dive into. She is just an extremely skilled writer, and I think you will love her work if you connected with her interview today. Thank you for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.